Frewaka is a 2025 movie about a woman who becomes a caretaker to an elderly woman that lives inside a house with a lot of dark secrets. Now, Frewaka is a movie that, generally speaking, I am drawn to. I love folk horror tales, and this being an Irish folk horror, the Irish, as well as a lot of European countries, have a deep history of folk tales and mythological beings to draw from, and I'm always ready to dive into these as they dovetail so nicely with the horror genre. All these stories about creatures or presence are pretty horrific just in their actual telling of the stories about them themselves, as traditionally they were used as teaching tools to frighten people or children into doing certain things. So it is a natural fit. The one thing I've noticed about this type of genre lately, though, is that it's starting to follow some very similar troubling patterns. Now, I point to the recent movie Starvaker as a movie that encompasses the same type of pitfalls as well as strengths as Frewaka does. There seems to be this growing trend recently where it comes to folk horror to lean heavily on the atmosphere and the suggestions of the mythology underneath, but to keep everything rather vague and essentially dine out almost completely on the potential of what's happening versus what is actually happening or a strong narrative thrust. Shu is a woman recently married and expecting her first child when she gets the news that her estranged mother has hanged herself in her Irish flat. Shu and her wife, Mila, are in the process of clearing out that apartment when Shu gets a job as a caretaker to an elderly woman out in the countryside. Now, needing the money for her baby on the way, Shu takes the job and travels out to this old house in this small town to care for a difficult invalid woman. Now, the woman's name is Peg, and after a fair bit of resistance, she allows Shu to come in, and although it's a bit more of a combative relationship between the two for the first few days, they do settle in. Shu begins to see that Peg is very superstitious and keeps these charms around the house that go back to the old stories and rituals that Shu's mother was fond of, which then brings Shu back to some of the turmoil that she faced during her childhood. Also, very clearly, Peg is hiding something, and Shu begins to find clues as she spends time wandering around the house. Now, this is a great setup, and really right off the bat, I have to commend the atmosphere and the mood that this movie portrays. It's dark, it's quiet, utilizes the slow burn style that I am so fond of. The characters are flawed and interesting, and it presents a story idea that is full of mystery and possibilities. Now, where this gets a little tricky is it stays in this possibilities area of the story a little too long. Now, I love slow burn, but the story needs to progress and answers need to come in a way that keeps me interested and on the hook. And similar to Starvaker that I mentioned earlier, this movie feels like so much setup with very little actual progress through the course of the story. It falls in love so much with its setting and the ability to have weird or creepy type scary moments that it sort of forgets about revealing the things behind them that make them interesting. Almost like it knew it didn't have much under the hood, and so it delays that reveal as long as possible. It felt like the quintessential, but wait, there's more. Like one of those TV shopping programs where they talk about some cool thing and you think, okay, I'll get that. And they say, but wait, there's more. And they say another selling point of the product. And then, but wait, there's more. Another point. And then another point. And then another and another and another. It's like, okay, you've sold me. Now give me the item.
But wait, there's more.
This movie kind of feels like that. Here's something else spooky, and then something else, and then something else, and then something else. The thing with horror movies, and I've talked about this a bit before, more so than with any other genre, is that they get sold mostly on their premise. And so there's a lot of times that that's where the focus is so much that they get stuck in first gear a lot. Now that was the problem with Starvaker and a few others I've seen recently, and now this one. Now I don't want to shortchange this as saying it doesn't have a story or anything to say beyond its premise, because it does. At the end of the day, the story wraps itself up in a way that works for its narrative, and everything does fit together. The problem is that there's just so much time that it spends without moving forward that the impact the story ends up having is dulled. It's hard sometimes to see the fat in a horror movie if it's the scary moments or the scenes, because that's a lot of the draw of the genre. But fat is still fat. Slow burn tension, elaborate build-ups, patient storytelling, and sustained mysteries are usually a great recipe of a compelling and memorable film. There's just this weird internal hunger that everyone has where if their brains aren't being fed for too long, it just starts to drift. And once it does, it's tough to get back. So it's important to feed that brain, even if it's just a little bit on each scene to keep it engaged. Now, of course, the maddening thing is everyone's brain needs to be fed differently and will have different reactions accordingly. It's what makes anything creative so hard. We all interpret art differently. But overall, this movie has an interesting premise. It has a nice folklore to draw from. The characters are interesting and compelling. The performances are all excellently done. And there's a complex backstory for those specific characters. Now, this is not a simple idea like a woman goes to an old house and runs into a bunch of spirits. It's not that kind of story. And that is a great thing. I mean, all things being equal, I would rather have something like this where it's a deeper dive into a story than not. But with this, it hinted at that deepness for a little too long without allowing us to understand it more. And then it was over. Like part of that salesman approach. Keep talking, keep distracting, and then close out the sale and get the hell out of there as fast as you can. But I want to feel like I'm on a journey, not just being sold to. I'd give this movie a B, but let me know what you think.